what does it mean for you to be a Pakistani?
Pakistan predominantly identified by one single faith does not mean or does not translate that the people of that faith has to become a hegemon within their own country.
When you identify the Baloch, the Pashtun, the Hazaras and others, let us know that before the creation of Pakistan, what was the nature of their relationship in the Baloch territory? Were they harmonious? Were they peaceful?
When people on the basis of an agenda of succession, they chose to do armed struggle, and when they picked up arms, these communities, particularly whom we identify as settlers who hail from now the different provinces of Pakistan, have been primarily targeted. They clearly have become the perpetrators of genocide.
The Punjabis are taking over Balochistan. The second is based on geopolitics, that CPEC is new colonization through Chinese companies. And the third is that the state is brutal and violating human rights, and the missing case issue. What's your perspective on these three allegations?
This is one wrong assumption of these militants, for which they have brought thousands or hundreds of youngsters, and their lives have been squandered. One player, one country, which is committed to this cause, not of realizing independent Balochistan, but creating a reasonable irritant for the state of Pakistan, is India. This is my question to the militants. What are they getting out of it? Do they genuinely believe and think that 100 or 200 or 400 people who are sitting across Europe in different countries would give them so-called freedom in their plate, and they would pull the strings, and someday a ceremony will be there and they will get their independent Balochistan? They are making people fool.
Viewers, very warm welcome to another episode of We English News special program, Perspectives. Today we are honored to be joined by one of the leading statesmen and intellectual thinkers, but also a former Prime Minister, Anwaar-ul-Haq Kakar. Today, Your Excellency, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we'd like to benefit from your presence regarding your experiences, your understanding, and your perspectives on some of the most key and critical issues that Pakistan is currently facing. But first off, let me ask you, what does it mean for you to be a Pakistani? Because the context of my question is that a lot of politics in South Asia, whether it is Bangladesh, whether it is Balochistan, whether it is KPK, seems to be influenced by identity politics. So what does it mean to be a Pakistani for a former Prime Minister of Pakistan?
Well, thanks once again for having me. There is no doubt about that one of the most intriguing questions to all the political scientists around the world is the question of identity. Who you are, what do you stand for? Is it your territorial nationalism? Is it your racial nationalism? Is it your linguistic nationalism? How do you link your identity, which can be translated into political rights, into a political unit, or into a polity for that matter? When this question comes to my mind, of course, one of the most important element of the question of identity is your history. When you say who you are, there has to be a past and a sense of future that would link you and carry you, take you towards your future. So when we talk of Pakistan's construct identity question, many people trace it back to Muhammad bin Qasim and the advent of Islam in South Asia. And in my humble understanding and view, it's quite a myopic and not that realistic approach towards this construct of Pakistani identity.
And why is that?
Because if you want to understand the geography, which is today's Pakistan, you have to trace it back to Alexander. When Alexander initiated his journey towards the east, towards the Persian Empire, and those northern nomadic tribes, which are currently known as the Central Asian people or the Mongol-Turkic origin tribes, he turned around the area which today is known as Jhelum and current days Pakistan. You will be hearing from the people in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa the traces of the Greek tribes. So the journey, at least, even it is beyond before that, but at least in the recorded history, it starts from Alexander. Then the Persians are here, then the Arabs are here, then the European colonizers are here. So it's a blend. It's a blend. The collective memory, which today is of Pakistan, consists of Arabic language, Persian language, Indo-European languages, and shaping up the local languages.
So does it mean that, in your view, Pakistan is like Asian melting pot of civilizations and cultures?
But it has been indeed. I hail from Balochistan, and Mehergarh civilization is oldest than endest. Actually, the inhabitants of the Mehergarh civilization were the one who went and who settled in the plain areas, and they shaped up the Indus civilization. So if you trace it back to that, you're talking about at least 12,000 years back. So this is the era, this is the geography where this blending has been happening. So culture has been shaping up, new languages have been developed.
So when you talk about current environment in which ethnic politics and identity politics seems to be dominant in terms of shaping the international discourse and challenging the territorial integrity and UN Charter and the concept of sovereignty in several developing countries, which emerged after as part of the post Second World War world order. Do you think is it based on a neglect of history or a continuation of new imperialism in the form of overemphasis of ethnic identity?
I think so. It's quite complex. It's not that easy to respond to such philosophical and historical queries in few of the sentences. But as I was explaining earlier, don't get me wrong, when I de-linked the advent of Muhammad bin Qasim into South Asia, that I'm divorcing the religious part of the identity. That is also a part. But why did I call it myopic? In my opinion, it's not the whole. It's not the all of it. Pakistan predominantly identified by one single faith does not mean or does not translate that the people of that faith has to become a hegemon within their own country. Rather, it's more of a pluralistic idea where they do have their own distinct identity, where they are not apologetic about that identity, where they do take pride in that spiritual identity, alongside with others who disagree, who differ, who diversify on the question of same identities, be it spiritual, ethnic, social, historical, and they try to create a modus vivendi and a pluralistic society where the social, economic, and political rights can be translated through citizenry, through the idea of citizenry, through the concept of citizenry. So there has to be a state which was in 1947 envisioned as to be called Pakistan, and a citizenry where there is a lot of diversification on all the accounts. But in terms of rights, it has to equalize with one another. And in terms of responsibility also, they have to share and own that responsibility. That is what to me is the idea of Pakistan.
Brilliant. Now let's come to Balochistan, which I think is part of global geopolitics, as well as a very important part of Pakistan, which offers both hope for the future of Pakistan's progress, but also some concerns that the Western powers are raising regarding its role in the future construct of the world order. But before we come to the domestic issues and challenges of Balochistan, I'd like your perspective on where do you see Balochistan in the emerging world order?
Balochistan is an important and will remain an important part in the future development and the functionality of the central state of Pakistan. In my opinion, I do not see any other future of Balochistan. They are interlinked with one another. The Federation of Pakistan is part of Balochistan. One of the most important federating unit is that province. And the province of Balochistan cannot be a viable polity without the Federation of Pakistan. So they have to, they are intertwined and they would be supporting and supplementing one another. How that journey will be realized, how that journey would shape up itself, are there any irritants at the moment to acquire that destiny, that objective? Yes, there are. Are there challenges? Yes, of course there are. Am I delusional or in denial where I do not see what is happening in my home province? No, that is not the case. But yes, my perspective is different. My angle is different. I view it altogether from a different prism. That's why my forecast, that's why the way I foresee how things would unfold is probably different than many of the people probably who do follow Balochistan, and they see it differently. For me, first of all, you have to understand the ethnography of Balochistan province. Balochistan is not mono-ethnic group of Baloch ethnicity. It carries a sizable Pashtun minority, 30 to 34, 35, 36% of the population. Then there are sizable community which is known as settlers. They are next to Pashtuns, and there is a prominent Hazara ethnic group. So if you are talking of Balochistan, you are talking primarily of 4 ethnic groups who share the history of that land, who share the culture of that land, who diversify in languages and in terms of races. But they have been the inhabitants of that land for centuries. It's not that they have been constructed or that population have been brought in with the creation of Pakistan. They have been before Pakistan. They have been resident of those lands, some of them even for a millennia, more than a millennia. And the last settlements have been for centuries.
But let me, sorry to interrupt you, but when you identify the Baloch, the Pashtun, the Hazaras, and others, let us know that before the creation of Pakistan, what was the nature of their relationship in the Baloch territory? Were they harmonious? Were they peaceful? And when we hear about insurgencies, is this a consequence of unequal distribution of opportunities or some foreign agenda or both?
There has historically always been a very smooth and cordial relations amongst all the ethnic groups. These settlers, either they hail from the central province of Punjab, or the people from central provinces of India, UP and Bihar, or people from Kashmir, or other parts of the South Asia at that time, they remained peaceful. They contributed in shaping up those societies. They contributed in shaping up those economies. The Britishers, when they envisioned that they would establish a garrison town of Quetta, most of these artisan workers, they were brought in. And as there was not great communications at the time, so people preferred to settle over there. So they've been there in somewhere from mid-18th century. Having said this, this is for the first time in these last 2 decades when people, on the basis of an agenda of succession, they chose to do armed struggle. And when they picked up arms, these communities, particularly whom we identify as settlers who hail from now the different provinces of Pakistan, have been primarily targeted. And targeted in a way that, in my humble opinion, they clearly have become the perpetrators of genocide. Unfortunately, most of the people here in this country think that the perpetrator of genocide can only be state actors. On the other hand, at a global scale, all the responsible governments and the United Nations do recognize that state and non-state actors both can be the perpetrators of genocide, provided if they fulfill that definition. And that is, if you try to attempt and systematically eliminate an ethnic group. And that's what exactly the BLA, the BLF, the BRA is doing. Unfortunately, where we are missing, that we have not been able to enunciate or articulate these gory and terror acts of these non-state actors, which would have been never ever accepted in the post-Second World War in any country. I am amazed at the people who try to rationalize and give a level of acceptance to the violence and within our own country. But if it is happening either on European continent or on Asian continent somewhere else, on African continent, they view it altogether different. But in my province and in my country, the violence or the tool of violence which is being applied and implied by all these non-state actors is somehow or the other being viewed and projected in a heroic manner, which is, to me, quite appalling and quite disturbing, that how mainstream could see and rationalize violence in such a manner.
But let me share with you some of the major concerns regarding how Balochistan is being dealt with by Pakistani state are being shared, so that our viewers can benefit from your perspective on these concerns, whether they are well-founded or not. There are several concerns, but one is that it was the annexation of Balochistan was perhaps not in line with international law and the domestic sentiments. What's your take on that?
Look, we never had this administrative entity which we call as a province of Balochistan today. On the eve of creation of Pakistan, there were more or less 5 polities or entities which were a political unit at the time. As you're aware, that Britishers ruled this region for almost 200 years on the 2 principles. One was of the handling of the settled provinces, which was directly under the Raj. And then there was a rule of paramountcy where they would handle the princely states. So these 4 princely states were there: the state of Kalat, the state of Haran, the state of Makran, the state of Lasbela. And the 5th area was known as British Balochistan. So the Balochistan name was given to predominantly Pashtun area. It was ethnically composed by the majority Pashtun population, along with the leased area up till Taftan and the Dera Bukti and Kolu Mari area. They were attached to it. So the name Balochistan was affiliated with the Pashtun area, and the areas which consist of Baloch population were known as the state of Kalat, Haran, Makran, and Bela. So they were no Balochistan applied on these territories. The name Balochistan. Indian Independence Act 1947, which was passed, there was a long discussion during this independence movement at the behest of Congress and Muslim League both. And these 565 princely states and their chieftains, they argued that if the Britishers are leaving, then we should also be given the right of self-determination. We should be allowed for our own populations to have our own independent kingdoms. Cutting the long story short, Congress was the one who resisted this idea vehemently, and I think so for the right reasons. They argued with the British that if you allow 565 princely states to become the countries, it would be tantamount to the balkanization of South Asia. So we would be having border disputes, one kingdom would be attacking another one. So you would leave such a complex situation behind in South Asia that we would be fighting for next many centuries over.
It will be ungovernable.
Ungovernable, okay. and very, very complex and challenged in that manner. So again, it was decided that only the two dominants of Pakistan and Indian Union would be allowed under that law to remain independent states. And these 565 princely states would align themselves either to join Pakistan or India. Not just this freedom was given to them, but a guidance was also provided to them that you have to align geographically, either you are close in proximity with Pakistan or India. You have to identify the sentiment of your population. As everyone knows, the subcontinent was bifurcated on the basis of spiritual identity, on the basis of faith. The majority of the Muslim area was craved out to become the future Pakistan. And this guidance was given to the chieftains of the princely state to exercise the sentiment of their respective population, and that tool of accession should be used so they could be incorporated either into Pakistan or India. So in our case, the Nawab of Haran, Nosharwani, Abdurrahman Nosharwani, he was the first who initiated this document of accession, and he signed it with Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, followed by Jam Ghulam Qadir of Lasbela, then by Nawab Mukran, and a resolution of Quetta municipality was passed by British Balochistan, which was later on known as the Commissionerate Province also. And these entities, all of them, they already signed document of accession with Pakistan, and the state of Kalat was present days Balochistan's approximately 20 to 22% of the geography, which starts from the outskirts of Quetta and up till Wad. There were two main regions of Jalawan and Sarawan in that. That remained deterred, and that indecisiveness was there, as then Khan of Kalat was flirting with this idea that whether it would be possible for him to remain independent or not. So he signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan and deliberated on this question, whether to join India or Pakistan. To remain independent was never a legal option. So what is the accusation over here that the Baloch or the Kalat wanted to join India and we forcefully took over that area? If that is the case, let it be supported by historical evidence. There was not a single individual in the whole of the region who wanted to be incorporated with the Indian Union. So you never had a legal option which was available at the time. It was either to join Pakistan or India. So this acquisition, so-called a forceful acquisition of these areas by Pakistan, is absurd. And it's to me, it's surreal, because the people do not understand that we are product of a legal document, which is the Indian Independence Act passed by Westminster Parliament. Even the question of Pashtunistan government arose on the agency of Waziristan. And in 1948, that question was also deliberated in British Parliament. Fakir of Ippi, he announced an independent Pashtunistan government in Afghanistan, which was of course not recognized by anyone. And that matter went to the British Parliament. They had the premise that as Waziristan was never part of the British Raj, so Pakistan could not be the legal heir to that area. And in that deliberation, it was concluded once and for all that all these areas are, the legal heirship is or has to be carried by the Federation of Pakistan. And that's what the legal status of that areas are.
You mentioned that before creation of Pakistan, the different settler communities and the original sons of soil lived and worked harmoniously for a very long time. So, but as a son of soil, give me your perspective, not just as a former Prime Minister, that how do you look at, how does a average Balochi look at people from other parts of Pakistan with hope, with concern, or with fear?
I have three generation relations with Baloch ethnicity. My grandfather was a family physician to then Khan of Kalat, Mir Ahmad Yar Khan. My father studied at the Hudai school in Kalat. Kalat was the heart of Baloch surrounding geography. And then I myself, I'm quite fluent in Brahvi language and Balochi also. If not fluent, but I'm quite reasonable in communicating in Balochi also. So I have found Baloch generally hospitable, loyal, warm, quite tolerant and open. I never ever in my wildest imagination thought that someone who would be non-Baloch would feel insecure in those peaceful region and surrounded by those beautiful people. They are one of the best people I know of, not in this region but beyond. Normally people would be surprised because some of the people who have got vested interests, they portray me as anti-Baloch. I respect and love Baloch. I am openly against militants, and I stand by that. When I explain my position as being anti-militant, it never ever means that I'm anti-Baloch. I've always been very much pro-Baloch. If I would have been an anti-Baloch person, I would have never learned their language. I love Brahvi language, and I am so comfortable when I speak in that language. To me, it's like almost my native language of Pashto. I get shocked. I am dismayed because to me, as a young citizen of that province, I used to travel a lot, particularly even in this area of Makran. I used to teach in Panjgur. I was a teacher in Panjgur around 96, sorry.
What did you teach?
We used to arrange classes for competitive exams preparation. And many people from different small villages of Panjgur, Chitkan and Khudabadan and Washbod, if there is an audience of Balochistan, they would know which sort of villages I'm referring to. And these youngsters would come and we will have some intellectual discourses over there. Same on this question of identity and Pakistan's construct and its relation of ethnicity with the federation. But it was in a very peaceful milieu, and the environment was quite promising. And they always, these youngsters of this Macron region seemed to be full of energy for learning, for thriving, for progressing. And then post 2000, everything transforms and it changes. I always take this intervention and this attempt as a crafted one, because I've been witness to almost everything. There has no organic social movement behind this armed struggle, so-called armed struggle, and this secessionist movement. It's crafted not by the original Baloch intelligentsia.
Who crafted it in your view?
I think so. There has always been a Baloch nationalism, a slogan for that. And Baloch nationalism has always intercommunicated with one another. And there were two major tendencies to articulate Baloch nationalism. One was led by late Mir Ghazbakhsh Bizinjo, and another one was led by late Nawab Khair Bakhsh Mari. Mir Ghazbakhsh Bizinjo advocated that Baloch in that region, they have to remain within the Federation of Pakistan, and if they want to pursue their political and economic rights, the best option for them is the Federation of Pakistan. Because on the one hand, there is a Persian Empire, which is quite jingoistic in its own tendency, and that sense of identity of the Persian-speaking race and linguistic identity both is a lot more strong, and they want to dominate the rest of the group. And it has happened in the experience of Iranian nation state. And then on the other hand, it is the Afghan, whom they have always viewed, rightly so, as expansionist. Who there have been tendency in Afghan history to expand itself beyond its territory to go up to Delhi. So the best option, according to Mir Ghazbakhsh Bizinjo, was to remain within the Federation of Pakistan. And over here, he thought that Baloch had a lot where he can gain and thrive economically, politically, socially, within these ethnicities whose sense of identity he thought was relatively not that strong, even be it Punjabis or Sindhis or Pashtuns within that province or outside the province. They can equally survive with one another. But on the other hand, Nawab Khair Bakhsh Mari, post 1979, when Hyderabad Sazish case was concluded and they were all taken out of the prison, he changed his mind from the parliamentary struggle towards the armed struggle. And next 2 decades, he remained, along with his tribe, committed to this idea that we can only achieve the rights for Baloch through armed struggle. He was an individual of the left orientation. He was quite inclined towards the old Marxist and Leninist ideas. And those methodologies for the nationalist groups, which was supported earlier by the former Soviet Union.
But they were non-violent.
They were violent.
Okay.
Oh, so he was for violence. He believed in armed struggle. He said, until unless we do not go for the armed struggle, the Baloch cannot acquire its political and economic rights.
But despite having Leninist influence and Marxist?
Yes. That's why this is what I'm referring to, that at that time, all these nationalist movements were supported throughout the Asia by former Soviet Union, and they encouraged these national movements. And their idea was that if you encourage a national identity and the self-determination is supported, they would eventually become part of that great commune of socialist and communism. This is what they did in Eastern Europe. This is what they wanted to do in Asia. So they were also part of that group. It was openly supported by then erstwhile KGB and their intelligence apparatus and their entire state structure. So Nawab Kharbash had the inclination towards that. And he is the one, I would say, who originated even this new insurgency. An incident occurred in year 2000 when Justice Nawaz Mari of Balochistan High Court was assassinated outside his office in the morning. And that complaint was registered by his family against Nawab Mari and his son. And from there it triggered, and he was apprehended for that allegation. And all of his sons, other than the eldest, all of them, they were fugitive. And then gradually and slowly, it transformed and it's morphed itself into a proper, organized, I would call insurgency, where initially the preparation for armed struggle was done into sleeping cells. Then this 20 years, they have transformed into different phases, this insurgency. So it has taken itself out from the heartland of Terabukti and Kolu, and it has spread it out to the rest of the areas of the province. And some of the leadership has also been changed. Traditionally, it used to be in the hands of the tribal chieftains. Now, it is the middle class Baloch who has taken up the reins of the leadership, and they have taken a lead role, be it in the shape of BLF, be it in the shape of this new so-called Majid Brigade, and so on and so forth.
But let me quickly reinforce my earlier question, that when you compare the ideology and the narrative of the forefathers who were influenced by Marxist ideology but coupled with violent struggle, fast forward, when you come to the current generation of insurgents, how do you compare their ideology, narrative, and tactics?
Well, the difference was at that time, I think so, the Soviet bloc was entirely behind such moves. So it was Pashtun nationalism, it was Baloch nationalism, it was Sindhi nationalism, even Bengali or Bangladeshi, not Bengali nationalism, Bangladeshi nationalism. I'm deliberately differentiating between the two. They were all supported by that bloc
Arab
of
nationalism.
Even Arab nationalism, yes.
Absolutely.
This time, I think so, the international order does not seem to alter or change the geography of Pakistan. To me, I do not see the traces of either any European power or United States or any big player who seems committed to the cause of an ethnic group and to support them and help them to crave out a new country. I don't see that happening. The only player and country which seems, even if it is an unattainable target in their own assessment, but for them it can be a huge irritant, is India. So India is benefiting from this conflict, and they are directly supporting the current lot. In 1970s or even before that, I do not see the Indian support in the manner as it is now. And again, I would reinforce that Indians do understand and appreciate that this is not 1971. There is a nuclear Pakistan, which if anyone dares to raise the escalation level, they exactly know what the outcome would be. So any insurgency, if there is no external military intervention, has a slightest or the slimmest chance of success. So once they understand this, that they cannot attain that goal of so-called independent Balochistan, so why are they then investing? They are investing that it remains an irritant for the Federation of Pakistan. It remains an irritant that the potential from where Pakistan can benefit economically, socially, politically, and become a more viable and a stable society, at least that should not be achieved. So that's why they are investing in it. And I think so, Everyone on the international forum knows that, understands that. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is not an accusation which I am putting up. Earlier, our head of the governments have been doing that. In Sharm el-Sheikh, Prime Minister Gilani gave a dossier to his counterpart, Indian counterpart at the time. American State of Secretary, he has been talking about it, that the Indians are using Afghan soil to destabilize Balochistan. So it is known to the US intelligence community, it is known to the European intelligence community, to the British intelligence community. Everyone around the globe knows it.
But let's come to the three specific meta-narratives that these insurgents and secessionist movement have tried to promote. And I would like your perspective on that. One is based on identity, that, the Punjabis are taking over Balochistan. The second is based on geopolitics, that, CPEC is new colonization through Chinese companies. And the third is that the state is brutal and violating human rights, and the missing case issue. What's your perspective on these three allegations?
Look, one such secessionist movements, they initiate and they begin their struggle. They also try to mobilize the recruits on certain ideas, on certain slogans, on certain promises. What are the assumptions of these secessionist movements? The assumptions are that the international environment is favorable for us, as there is a US-Chinese conflict. So in that conflict, the Europeans and the liberal Western world would want us to have a support, and that support would be translated in terms of material so that the Chinese influence could be contained. This is one wrong assumption of these militants, for which they have brought thousands or hundreds of youngsters, and their lives have been squandered.
And why is it wrong?
Why I am saying so? Yeah, of course. Look, United States or Europe has a so-called containment China policy that was for its economic competition. And that economic competition is happening in South America, in Argentina, in Europe, in Serbia, in Central Asia, in North Caucasus, up till Turkey. So the BRI is a whole idea in which this part which we call Gwadar and Balochistan or Baloch territory is too small in such a large picture. And nowhere else the United States or the Western world has turned this economic competition or the policy of containment into a violent tool. It has not happened in South America. It has not happened on the continent of Europe. It is not happening in Central Asia. How on God's earth it has become so exclusive and important, this small territory on which Baloch lies, that the entire world has changed its policy and view, and they would start supporting the creation of this so-called new state. Look at the recent examples of Americans residing in Iraq. The Kurdish question was there. Why didn't they create a Kurdish independent state? They could have done it so easily for them, and even the state of Israel is an open friend to the Kurdish cause and the Kurdish state. They couldn't do it. They didn't do it because they understand that they are not there to draw the international maps and alter the geography. So I see this as a delusional assumption which you can throw to attract a following on a false promise, and on that false promise, people's lives are being squandered. One player, one country which is committed to this cause, not of realizing independent Balochistan, but creating a reasonable irritant for the state of Pakistan is India. Again, I'm trying to explain that India is not in this position to help these secessionists and separatists to make it realize and make it happen. That they understand. But yes, they can invest in, so they are a constant and continuous irritants, maybe for a decade, 2, 3. What is the shelf life of this insurgency? Nobody can predict. But they will continue supporting as far as they remain an irritant.
Your thoughts on the CPEC and missing persons case?
Well, I spoke about the CPEC that I do not see.
Okay.
This is the presumption which has led to the delusion. Secondly, even this recent, the so-called civil activism of Baloch Yakjehti Committee, and it has received a lot of support from the mainstream Pakistani thinkers also, who feel probably that in their conscience they are siding with the right cause. If you analyze and observe and monitor the role of this so-called Baloch Yakjehti Committee, it is not a group of civil activists who are talking about the rights of the citizenry. What actually they are talking about or they are articulating is that they are sharing a common goal with the militants. Their eventuality, their struggle is for the creation of so-called independent Balochistan, but their tool is militancy, their tool is armed struggle, and their tool is narrative.
So there is a nexus?
Well, there is not a nexus, they are two in one. There is the nexus or alliance is between two different entities.
So one is using hard power, the other is using soft power.
The other is using soft power. And they are very cleverly crafting all this strategy. It's a part of a strategy. If they would have been interested in curbing violence, then it should have applied equally to all the people who have been the victim of those violence.
So here is...
so there is a selective victimhood. If these militants, let's say they get eliminated in a counterinsurgency operation or in any action of law enforcement agency, they would portray those instances, those events as extrajudicial killing. They would categorize it as an enforced disappearance. They will have a human rights vocabulary they would be applying, which would be important to the international audience, to the different right groups, where they can seek attention. But at the same time, the people who have been victim of the violence, let's say, by these militants, by these perpetrators of genocide, the law enforcement people, their
where's their perspective? Where's
their deaths are not acceptable. What do you think that if a Scot comes and kills English policemen in the heart of London City, what would be the response of the UK's government and mainstream, either media? I even recall that one of the leader of the IRA, Gerry Adams, probably his name was, his face was allowed to be broadcasted on BBC, but his voice was stifled. His voice was not allowed to be broadcasted. Only you could have shown the face of Gerry Adams for quite a long. And over here, I am surprised that the outfits who are the mouthpiece, who masquerade as a civil activist, and they veil themselves, and people are so blind that they try and encourage and provide an opportunity and platform to them so they could voice the voice of those terrorists. This is very surprising for me. But even if they want to do it, they should be identified as a mouthpiece of those outfits. If they identify themselves, if they declare themselves, then I don't have an issue with it.
That brings me to the last question, that at the strategic level, as a former Prime Minister, as someone who comes from Balochistan, understands Balochistan very well, has lived there, on one side, you mentioned that these insurgents have a two-pronged strategy, a combination of, basically it's smart power, a combination of hard power and soft power. Hard power is the use of violence against state institutions, and in soft power they found some faces who could voice and build psychosocial space and sympathy for the kinetic actions. So on the kinetic side, the state has a strategy based on intelligence-based operations, counterterrorism. What should be the state's strategy to counter the soft power of these insurgents?
Well, it's a long haul call. To be honest with you, I think so. The provincial government should take lead in that.
Okay.
The provincial, when we talk of state, even according to the constitutional articles definition, it is the federal government and the provincial government, parliament, and the rest of the components. Sure. So in this scenario, the provincial government needs to take the lead. And first of all, you need a chief executive who has a sense of ownership of the state of Pakistan and its narrative. If there is a state of confusion in the thought process of chief executive or his cabinet or his bureaucracy, you will be suffering from the policy of paralysis. You would paralyze the entire system. As everyone tries to be the master of the public administration, the organizational structure and the organizational response, there has to be a nervous system. In that nervous system, you plan, you deliberate, you think 100 times. But then when it comes to the phase of execution, there should be no confusion at all. So problem with us is that we are at the thinking phase, at the planning phase, and at the same time when we are in execution phase, we think and rethink. That leads towards a state of confusion and chaos, in my opinion, which is not good for the response mechanism of this so-called soft power. All the stakeholders, major political parties, intelligentsia, media, thinkers, writers, poets, all the components of the society, they need to respond to that. First of all, why are we shying away by telling these youngsters that this so-called independent Balochistan is unattainable? Why are we shying away from it? If we tell people that this or that slogan cannot be realized, why in Balochistan or in the rest of Pakistan can't have people decency enough, honesty enough, and have an honest conversation that, is this a possibility? If it is a possibility, then it's fine. And if it is not, why don't you tell people on their face? Why do attempt to rationalize and give acceptability to all this chaotic and violent situation from which no one is benefiting? If they accuse state that what the state is getting out of it, what is exactly, this is my question to the militants, what are they getting out of it? Do they genuinely believe and think that 100 or 200 or 400 people who are sitting across Europe in different countries would give them so-called freedom in their plate, and they would pull the strings, and someday a ceremony will be there and they will get their independent Balochistan? They are making people fool, or they are fooling themselves. I don't know what is the case. There could be people who are actually delusional and they do believe in it's sort of a mental disease. You can't do anything about it. There are radical views like far right on the European continent. They think that we will wipe out the Muslim population from UK or from Germany or from France. That's how these militants think, that we will wipe out either Sindhis or Punjabis or Hazaras or Pashtuns from the Baloch land. This is not possible in 21st century. It is not an acceptable international norm. Well, Hitler tried it till 1945. He failed. And it's a great lesson in history that anyone who tries to follow those footsteps, that kind of fascism of Mussolini or Nazi German, has always failed. So if we want to learn about democracy from European continent and the West, we should also seek lessons from the Nazi experiment, from the fascist experiment. It never works in any society, and it will never work here.
Excellency, thank you so much for your very frank, original, and insightful perspective on some of the most critical issues that this region, Pakistan, and particularly Balochistan has been facing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.